Tuesday, September 17th, 1935. 11:47 p.m. The Cotton Club, Harlem. You walk inside and immediately the smoke hits you. Cigarette smoke so thick you can barely see across the room. The smell of expensive whiskey, the kind most folks in Harlem could never afford. Duke Ellington's playing Sophisticated Lady on stage. White folks from downtown Manhattan, they're sitting there watching black performers dance and sing like it's a zoo exhibit or something. That was Harlem, you know. Black culture, packaged up, sold to white money, controlled by white gangsters who didn't even live in the neighborhood they were bleeding dry. Now, in the back corner, near the kitchen door where you could always see the exits, sat a man, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson. They called him Bumpy, 30 years old, built like a boxer, eyes that never, ever stopped calculating. He's wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most Harlem families made in 3 months. His hands, flat on the white tablecloth, perfectly still. There's a glass of bourbon sitting in front of him, untouched. Bumpy wasn't there to enjoy the show. No, no, no. He was there because Madame Stephanie Clair sent him, the queen of numbers. She ran the most profitable illegal lottery in Harlem, employed 247 people, kept the money in black hands. And now, some white gangster from the Bronx wanted to take it all. The music stops, mid-song. The crowd goes silent in that unnatural way that happens when violence is about to walk through the door. Even drunk white folks from Park Avenue could smell it. Blood in the water. Dutch Schultz walks in, through the front entrance like he owns the place. And technically, he did. The Cotton Club paid him protection money. Every speakeasy, every gambling den, every whorehouse in Harlem was starting to pay tribute to the beer baron of the Bronx. Schultz was 33 years old and looked like a killer. His real name, Arthur Flegenheimer, but he took the name Dutch Schultz from an old street gang because it sounded tougher. Cold blue eyes, slicked back brown hair, the kind of face that looked like it had been punched 1,000 times and enjoyed it. He's surrounded by 6 men, big men, armed men, men who'd killed before and would absolutely kill again tonight if their boss gave the word. Schultz's eyes find Bumpy immediately. This was theater. This was a message being delivered in front of witnesses. Bumpy takes a slow sip of his bourbon. His hands don't shake, not even a little. He sets the glass down with the same precision a chess master uses when moving a piece. Then he waits. He was good at waiting. Patience was the only advantage a black man had in a white man's world. The storm was coming. Bumpy could see it in the way Schultz smiled. That smile said blood would run through Harlem streets before this was over. That smile said the Numbers War had just become personal. But here's the thing, that smile didn't know it was already too late. Dutch Schultz crosses the Cotton Club floor like Sherman marching through Georgia. His 6 enforcers spread out in a semicircle, blocking any exit Bumpy might take. The crowd presses back against the walls. Even the waiters disappear into the kitchen. Duke Ellington and his orchestra, frozen, just watching. Schultz stops 5 feet from Bumpy's table, close enough to be threatening, far enough that Bumpy would have to stand to strike him. It was a dominance game, and Schultz, he played it well. Ellsworth Johnson, Schultz says, loud enough that every single person in the club hears every syllable. Or should I call you Bumpy? Like a good little N, he uses the word, the full word, lets it hang in the air like a noose. Nobody breathes, and Bumpy doesn't move. His expression doesn't change one bit. He might as well be listening to a weather report. His eyes stay on Schultz's face, reading him, measuring him, memorizing him. You've been running numbers for that uppity-colored woman, Schultz continues, enjoying himself now. Stephanie thinks she can tell me, Dutch Schultz, that I can't operate in Harlem, that these spooks and jungle bunnies are off limits. He laughs. His men laugh with him on cue. But I'm here to deliver a message to you, to her, to every N in Harlem who thinks they can keep what's mine. Schultz leans forward, plants both hands on Bumpy's table. His breath smells like onions and arrogance. You've got 48 hours to tell Madame Queen that her operation is now my operation. She can work for me at 20 cents on the dollar, or she can bleed. You can work for me and live, or you can refuse and die. Those are the only two options. There is no number three. The room is a tomb. 200 people watching, 200 witnesses. Schultz wanted them to watch. He wanted the story to spread through Harlem like wildfire. Bow to the white man or die. Those were the rules. That was America. Bumpy finally speaks. His voice is quiet, barely above a whisper. Schultz has to lean closer to hear. You finished? Schultz blinks. That wasn't the response he expected. Fear, rage, submission, those he understood, but this calm, this absolute absence of reaction, it confused him. You got something to say, boy. Bumpy stands up, slowly, deliberately. He's slightly shorter than Schultz, but something about the way he carries himself makes him seem larger. He buttons his suit jacket with one hand. Then he picks up his glass of bourbon, drains it in one swallow, and sets the empty glass down with a soft clink. Tell your boss, Bumpy says, his voice still that same deadly whisper, that Harlem doesn't bend. And neither do I am the boss, you stupid N. No, Bumpy interrupts. His eyes lock onto Schultz's and something passes between them. Something cold, something final. You're just a white man who thinks violence makes him powerful, but violence is the last refuge of incompetence. And you, Mr. Flegenheimer, you're about to learn the difference between fear and respect. Schultz's face goes red. His hand moves toward his jacket, where the gun is. Bumpy doesn't flinch. You pull that piece in front of 200 people, and every cop in Manhattan will be on you by sunrise. But go ahead. Prove me right about the incompetence thing. 5 seconds. For 5 seconds, Dutch Schultz's finger hovers over his pistol. For 5 seconds, the entire Cotton Club holds its breath. For 5 seconds, the two men stare at each other like gunslingers at high noon. Then Schultz smiles. It's the kind of smile a shark makes before it bites. You just signed your death warrant, Bumpy. I'm sending 12 of my best men. You'll be dead before the weekend. Bumpy walks past him, so close their shoulders almost touch. When he reaches the door, he turns back. His voice carries across the silent room. Send 20. Then he walks out into the Harlem night. Behind him, Dutch Schultz laughs. It was the last time anyone would hear him laugh for a very, very long time. Ellsworth Raymond Johnson. Born October 31, 1905. Charleston, South Carolina. His father was a laborer. His mother took in laundry. When he was 10 years old, a gang of white boys beat him unconscious with a brick. Left that prominent bump on his skull that gave him his nickname. When he was 14, his family moved north during the Great Migration, chasing the promise that New York might be less vicious than the Jim Crow South. That promise, it was a lie, but it was a lie with more opportunity. Bumpy dropped out of high school at 15, started running with street gangs. He was smart, disciplined, and absolutely fearless. Those three qualities got him noticed by Madame Stephanie St. Clair, a black woman from Martinique who'd built the Numbers Racket in Harlem from nothing. She saw something in him that others didn't. Patience. Bumpy could wait. He could plan. He could take a beating and not retaliate until the moment was perfect. By 1933, at 28 years old, he was her top enforcer. He protected her runners, collected debts, defended Harlem's right to control its own economy. And when Dutch Schultz came sniffing around, Bumpy became something more. He became the shield between Harlem and the mob. Now, the numbers game. It was simple but brilliant. Every day, people would bet nickels, dimes, quarters on three-digit numbers from 0 to 999. The winning number came from the last three digits of the total mutual handle at a local racetrack, published in the newspaper every afternoon. It gave poor people hope. A 50-cent bet could win you $30. In a neighborhood where men worked 12-hour days for $3 a week, that was transformative money. That was rent. That was food. That was dignity. Madame sent. Claire's operation was honest. She paid winners within 24 hours. She employed locals. She kept the money in Harlem, and she made herself a fortune doing it. A fortune white gangsters wanted. Arthur Flegenheimer, Dutch Schultz, born in the Bronx in 1901 to German Jewish immigrants. His father abandoned the family when Arthur was 14. He turned to burglary, assault, and eventually bootlegging during Prohibition. He built an empire distributing beer to speakeasies throughout New York. He was violent, paranoid, and brilliant at business. He understood that Prohibition wouldn't last forever, so he needed to diversify. The Harlem Numbers racket generated an estimated $100 million annually. That's $2.3 billion in today's money. Can you believe that? Dutch Schultz wanted every penny. He started his takeover in 1931. First, he approached the black numbers bankers with an offer: work for him at dramatically reduced rates, or his men would burn their businesses and kill their families. Some submitted. Those who refused, they disappeared. By 1933, over 40 people had been murdered in the Harlem Numbers War. Schultz used terror like a surgical instrument, carving fear into the heart of the community. But Madame sent. Clair didn't bow, and neither did Bumpy Johnson. What Schultz didn't understand, what white gangsters never understood, was that Harlem wasn't just territory. It was home. People fight differently when they're defending home. They fight with a desperation and intelligence that invaders can't match, because they have nowhere else to go. They fight with the knowledge that surrender means the end of everything. Dutch Schultz thought violence was power. He sent goons to beat numbers runners. He firebombed storefronts. He kidnapped competitors and tortured them in Bronx warehouses. He operated with the certainty that overwhelming force would break resistance. Bumpy Johnson understood something Schultz didn't. Violence was only power if the other side feared it more than they valued what they were defending. And Harlem valued its freedom more than it feared Dutch Schultz. In the 72 hours after that confrontation at the Cotton Club, three things happened. First, Bumpy Johnson disappeared. Nobody saw him on the streets. His apartment was empty. Even Madame St. Clair didn't know where he was. Rumors spread that he'd fled the city, that Schultz's threats had worked, that Harlem's protector had abandoned them. Those rumors were exactly what Bumpy wanted people to believe. Second, Dutch Schultz increased his violence. He sent teams of gunmen into Harlem every night. They beat runners. They smashed up numbers joints. They publicly humiliated anyone connected to St. Clair's operation. The message was clear. Bumpy Johnson was a coward, and resistance was futile. Third, 12 of Dutch Schultz's best enforcers received orders to find Bumpy Johnson and kill him. These weren't street thugs. These were professional killers. Vincent Mad Dog Call, who'd murdered a 5-year-old child in a botched hit, was one of them. Bo Weinberg, Schultz's most trusted lieutenant, led the team. They were experienced, armed, and motivated by the $5,000 bounty Schultz had placed on Bumpy's head. They never stood a chance. Here's what Dutch Schultz didn't know. Bumpy Johnson had spent the last 2 years preparing for this exact moment. He'd studied Schultz's operation like a general studying an enemy army. He knew where Schultz's men drank, where they kept their girlfriends, where they collected money, where they felt safe. More importantly, He knew their routines. Schultz's men operated on predictable schedules because Schultz himself was obsessively organized. Every Tuesday, his collectors picked up protection money from speakeasies in a specific order. Bronx first, Upper Manhattan second, Harlem last. Every Thursday, the cash got counted at a garage on 147th Street, then transported to Schultz's main office in the Bronx. Every Saturday night, his enforcers gathered at the same Song Saloon on 134th Street to drink and celebrate their intimidation of Harlem. Bumpy had watched them for months. He'd memorized everything. The night of the Cotton Club confrontation, Bumpy went to ground. Not in Harlem, that's what Schultz expected. Instead, he stayed with a light-skinned woman in Jamaica, Queens, an apartment building where nobody knew him. He shaved his head bald, wore glasses, dressed like a railroad porter. When he left the apartment, white cops looked right through him because all black men looked the same to them. For 3 days he planned. He met with 27 men in groups of 2 and 3, never more. These were men loyal to Madame St. Clair, men who'd grown up in Harlem, men who understood this wasn't just about money, it was about survival. Bumpy gave each team specific instructions, times, locations, targets, and one iron rule: nobody dies unless absolutely necessary. This wasn't about killing. Killing would bring federal heat, bring the press, bring consequences that Harlem couldn't afford. This was about sending a message that Schultz would understand in his bones. Bumpy also reached out to someone Schultz had underestimated, Madame St. Clair herself. She'd spent 20 years building relationships with corrupt cops, judges, politicians. She knew who took bribes, who had affairs, who owed favors. She weaponized that information. By Friday, September 20th, 1935, the trap was set. Schultz's 12-man kill team was hunting a ghost. They kicked down doors in Harlem, terrorized families, and found nothing. Bumpy Johnson had vanished like smoke. Their frustration made them sloppy, and sloppy men make fatal mistakes. The execution would happen in stages over 7 days. Each stage designed to dismantle Schultz's operation piece by piece, like a surgeon removing a tumor. Bumpy called it the 7 cuts. On Saturday morning, he sent one message to every member of his team: "The lion sleeps tonight, but tomorrow he hunts." Day 1. Sunday, September 22nd, 1935, 3:17 a.m. The same Song Saloon, 134th Street. 8 of Schultz's enforcers are inside, drunk on bootleg gin and confidence. They'd spent the night terrorizing Harlem residents, demanding to know where Bumpy Johnson was hiding. They'd beaten a 70-year-old shop owner named Marcus Green so badly he lost 3 teeth. They'd laughed about it. Now they're laughing about something else. About how Bumpy was probably dead in a ditch somewhere. About how Harlem's protector was a coward. The laughter stops when the doors lock from outside. 20 seconds later, every window in the saloon shatters simultaneously. Molotov cocktails, bottles filled with gasoline and stuffed with torn rags, lit and thrown with precision. 8 bottles, 8 windows. The interior erupts in flames. The enforcers try the doors, chained shut. They try the back exit, blocked with a delivery truck parked against it. They break through the bathroom window, tumbling into the alley. Bumpy's men are waiting, not with guns, with baseball bats. Louisville sluggers, ash wood, the kind Negro League players used. The beating takes 90 seconds, systematic, professional. Bones broken in specific places, hands, kneecaps, ribs. Injuries that would heal but never quite right. Injuries that would remind them every single day for the rest of their lives. What happened when you came to Harlem thinking violence made you invincible? One man, Tommy, the executioner Martino, pulls a gun. Bumpy's second-in-command, Illinois Gordon, hits him in the elbow with a bat. The bone shatters. The gun clatters to the pavement. Illinois picks it up and throws it down a sewer grate. "Tell Dutch," Illinois says quietly, "that this was a warning. Next time we use bullets." By dawn, all 8 men are in Harlem Hospital. By noon, the story is on every street corner in New York City. The black gangsters had ambushed Schultz's men. The invincible beer baron had just lost a battle. Message delivered. 1. Day 2. Monday, September 23, 1935, 11:43 a.m. First National Bank, 125th Street. A white man in an expensive suit walks into the bank carrying a leather briefcase. He looks like a businessman, walks like he owns the world. The tellers smile at him. His name is Abraham Greenberg. He collects for Dutch Schultz. Every Monday, he deposits protection money into an account under a fake name, Joseph Marks. The account holds $23,000, 2 weeks of collections from speakeasies, brothels, and gambling dens throughout Harlem. Greenberg approaches the teller, slides a withdrawal slip across the counter, and waits. The teller disappears into the back. That's when Greenberg notices the 2 policemen standing near the entrance. They're watching him. His stomach drops. The bank manager emerges instead of the teller. "Mr. Greenberg, these officers would like a word." Abraham Greenberg was arrested for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit tax evasion. The anonymous tip. It came from a woman who refused to give her name but provided detailed records of every deposit, every withdrawal, and every fake identity Schultz used. That woman was Stephanie St. Clair. The account was frozen. $23,000 gone. Dutch Schultz lost 2 weeks of income in a single morning. Message delivered. 2. Day 3. Tuesday, September 24, 1935, 7:28 p.m. Schultz's Beer Warehouse, 149th Street, the Bronx. Dutch Schultz's operation wasn't just numbers. He still moved beer to speakeasies throughout the city. His main warehouse held 4,000 barrels of illegal beer worth $80,000. It was protected by 4 armed guards rotating in 12-hour shifts. At 7:28 p.m., during the shift change when only 2 guards are present, a fire starts in the building next door, a furniture store. The flames spread quickly, fueled by gasoline-soaked rags someone had left strategically placed. The fire department arrives within 8 minutes. By then, the warehouse roof is catching. The firemen evacuate the guards and begin fighting the blaze. In the chaos, nobody notices 3 men in firefighter coats enter the warehouse through a side door. They don't steal anything. They don't set fires. They open the spigots on 200 barrels and let the beer pour onto the concrete floor like a river. 4,000 gallons of profit, running down the drain. When Dutch Schultz arrives an hour later, he stands in a warehouse that smells like a tavern and watches his investment literally flowing into the sewers. The fire chief hands him a note that had been left on a barrel. "Harlem doesn't bend." Message delivered. 3. Day 4. Wednesday, September 25, 1935, 2:14 p.m. The Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz didn't trust New York anymore. He'd moved his main office to Newark, operating out of a restaurant called the Palace Chop House. He ate lunch there every Wednesday at exactly 2 p.m. Steak, rare, potatoes, whiskey. The same meal every week because routine gave him comfort. This Wednesday, his steak tastes wrong, bitter. He spits it out. Within 20 minutes, he's vomiting. Within an hour, he's in an ambulance. The doctors say food poisoning. Severe, but not fatal. He'll be sick for 3 days. The chef at the Palace Chop House had been paid $500 to add ipecac syrup to Schultz's meal. Not enough to kill him, just enough to humiliate him, just enough to make him weak, just enough to prove that Bumpy Johnson could reach him anywhere. Message delivered. 4. Day 5. Thursday, September 26, 1935, 10:02 p.m. The Cotton Club, Harlem. Dutch Schultz, still weak from food poisoning but furious, sends his remaining enforcers to the Cotton Club with orders to tear it apart. If they can't find Bumpy Johnson, they'll destroy everything he cares about. 8 men enter the club at 10:02 p.m. They pull guns, they shout threats, they flip tables. The band stops playing, the customers scatter. And then Bumpy Johnson walks through the front door, not hiding, not running, walking in like he's arriving for a dinner reservation. He's alone. The 8 enforcers turn their guns on him, 8 pistols pointed at one man. The odds couldn't have been worse. Bumpy raises his hands, but not in surrender, in greeting. "Gentlemen," he says calmly, "you're looking for me, here I am." Bo Weinberg, Schultz's top lieutenant, leads the group. He'd killed 17 men. He wasn't afraid of anyone, except right now, staring at Bumpy Johnson, he feels fear. "You got a death wish?" Weinberg asks. "No," Bumpy says, "but you might." That's when the doors open again. 20 men walk in, not gangsters. Police officers, uniformed NYPD cops. The lead detective, a man named Michael Corrigan, smiles at Weinberg. "Gentlemen, you're all under arrest for illegal possession of firearms, assault, and disturbing the peace." Weinberg's face goes white. "You can't, we have an arrangement." "You had an arrangement," Corrigan says, "but someone made me a better offer." Stephanie sent Clair had paid $10,000 in bribes to ensure that this exact moment would happen. Money that Dutch Schultz used to own these cops. Money that now belonged to the other side. As the enforcers are dragged out in handcuffs, Bumpy Johnson walks to the bar, orders a bourbon, and raises his glass to the stunned crowd. "To Harlem," he says. The crowd erupts in applause. Message delivered, 5. Day 6, Friday, September 27, 1935, 8:47 a.m. Dutch Schultz's personal residence, Bronx. Dutch Schultz wakes up to find 20 police cars surrounding his house. Federal agents. The IRS. They have warrants for tax evasion. Someone had provided detailed financial records showing that Schultz had hidden millions in income, using fake names and offshore accounts. That someone was Stephanie St. Clair. She'd been collecting evidence for 3 years. Schultz isn't arrested, not yet, but the investigation is public. Front-page news. The government is coming for him, and everyone knows it. His power is crumbling. Message delivered, 6. Day 7, Saturday, September 28, 1935, 3:33 p.m. Madame St. Clair's office, Lenox Avenue. Dutch Schultz's phone rings. He answers. "This is Bumpy Johnson." Schultz's hand tightens on the receiver. "You're a dead man." "No," Bumpy says calmly. "You are, you just don't know it yet. You came to Harlem thinking violence made you powerful. You were wrong. Violence is easy. Any fool can pull a trigger, but power, real power comes from knowing when to pull the trigger and when to make the other man destroy himself. You've lost your money, you've lost your men, you've lost your protection, and now you've lost your reputation. Everyone knows you couldn't conquer Harlem." "I'll kill you," Schultz hisses. "You'll try," Bumpy says, "and you'll fail, because you're fighting ghosts now. You can't shoot what you can't see. You can't intimidate people who have already decided they'd rather die than submit. Harlem is done with you, Mr. Flegenheimer. Pack up and go home." "I'm going to." "You're going to do nothing. Because if you escalate, I've given the IRS enough evidence to put you in prison for life. And I've given your rivals in the commission permission to move on your territory. You've got 2 choices. Leave Harlem alone or watch your empire burn from the inside. Those are the only 2 options. There is no number 3. Bumpy hangs up. Dutch Schultz sits in his office, staring at the dead phone, and realizes he'd been outplayed. Message delivered, 7. Thursday, October 23, 1935, 10:15 p.m. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz sits at his usual table, eating his usual meal. Steak, potatoes, whiskey. But nothing tastes right anymore. His operation is collapsing. The IRS is investigating. His men are in jail or in hospitals. Harlem has rejected him. Worse, the Commission, the governing body of New York's organized crime families, is losing patience. Charles Lucky Luciano, the most powerful gangster in America, had sent word, "Stop the Harlem War. You're drawing too much heat." Schultz refused. Now he would pay for that refusal. Two men walk into the Palace Chop House. Charles the Bug Workman and Emmanuel Mendy Weiss, professional killers employed by Murder, Inc. They weren't sent by Bumpy Johnson. They were sent by the Commission. But the reason they were sent was simple. Dutch Schultz had become a liability. His war with Harlem had attracted federal attention. His threats to assassinate prosecutor Thomas Dewey were going to bring down heat on the entire mob. He'd become more dangerous alive than dead. Bumpy Johnson hadn't killed Dutch Schultz. He'd maneuvered him into a position where his own people had to. The gunmen opened fire at 10:15 p.m. Dutch Schultz is shot in the abdomen. He staggers to the bathroom, collapses, and bleeds. He's rushed to Newark City Hospital, where he dies the next day after 21 hours of delirious rambling about buried treasure and betrayal. His last coherent words, according to police records, were, "A boy has never wept nor dashed 1,000 kin." Nobody knew what he meant. Maybe he didn't either. All that mattered was that Dutch Schultz, the beer baron of the Bronx, the man who thought he could conquer Harlem, was dead. When Bumpy Johnson hears the news, he's sitting in Madame St. Clair's office. She pours them both a bourbon. "You didn't kill him," she says. "Didn't have to," Bumpy replies. "I just made him kill himself." 3 days later, Stephanie St. Clair sends a telegram to the Newark police. "As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Madame St. Clair." It made front-page news. Unbelievable. The Harlem Numbers War officially ended on October 24, 1935. With Dutch Schultz dead, the Commission ordered all white gangsters out of Harlem's numbers racket. Charles Lucky Luciano brokered a deal. Harlem's black operators would pay tribute to the mob, but they'd maintain operational control. It wasn't perfect, but it was survival. Bumpy Johnson became a legend overnight. The man who defeated Dutch Schultz without firing a single bullet. The man who proved that intelligence could beat violence, that patience could overcome rage, that black Harlem could defend itself against white gangsters. He continued working for Madame St. Clair until 1936, when he was arrested on charges of pimping and extortion. He served 7 years in prison. When he was released, he built his own criminal empire, controlling gambling, narcotics, and protection rackets throughout Harlem. He ruled with the same philosophy he'd used against Schultz: calculated, patient, ruthless only when necessary. He died on July 7, 1968 at Wells Restaurant on 7th Avenue. A heart attack, sudden and final. He was 62 years old. Madame Stephanie St. Clair retired from the numbers game in 1937, having made her fortune. She became a political activist, fighting for civil rights and against police corruption. She died in 1969, but their legacy lived beyond them. The Harlem Numbers War proved something that America didn't want to believe: that black communities could organize, could fight back, could win against systems designed to destroy them. Bumpy Johnson's strategy against Dutch Schultz became a blueprint studied by civil rights activists, labor organizers, and revolutionaries. Don't meet violence with violence. Meet it with strategy. Don't fight the enemy where they're strong, fight them where they're weak. Don't destroy your opponent, make them destroy themselves. In the Cotton Club, where it all started, they still tell the story about the night Dutch Schultz called Bumpy Johnson a coward, and Bumpy responded by outthinking, outmaneuvering, and outlasting the most violent gangster in New York. There's a quote attributed to Bumpy Johnson, though nobody's sure if he actually said it, but it captures the essence of the man and the moment. Any fool can start a war. It takes a thinker to win one without the other side ever realizing they've lost. Dutch Schultz came to Harlem with guns, muscle, and arrogance. He thought violence was power. Bumpy Johnson taught him the truth. Violence is just noise. Power is the silence before the storm, the plan made in darkness, the trap that closes so perfectly the prey never even sees it coming. Dutch Schultz sparked deadly violence against Bumpy Johnson, and Bumpy Johnson turned that violence into a noose that Dutch Schultz hung himself with. The Numbers War was over. Harlem had won, and Bumpy Johnson became the Godfather of Harlem, not through murder but through mastery. In the end, patience proved deadlier than any bullet ever fired.